Welcome back to the Better Late Than Never Club. I'm Beck.
And I'm Frost.
Tonight we delve into the land of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice.
A literature classic or nightmare, depending on how you enjoyed it in high school.
Well, I didn't enjoy it because I didn't do it. But I didn't also not enjoy it because I also didn't do it. So I've never read it.
I have the vaguest recollection of doing it, but not actually reading the book or studying the material and just winging my way through the essay.
Just, this was what was going through your head? Just
it was
the whole
fully
time.
vibes. I think I knew two characters' names. I now only can recall one.
Go off. What is it?
Mr. Darcy.
Okay, yes, that's true.
That's the only character's name I can recall. Yet no, I don't remember anything else about the plot.
Wow, that's not very feminist of you. Well, I'll have you know that the main lady is called Elizabeth.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Lizzie.
The author is Jane Austen, right?
Correct.
That would have been my second guess for a character.
She just self-inserted. It's just
Literally.
fanfic between Jane Austen and Mr. Darcy.
Literally Mary Jane Austen.
Yeah. Well, this is a romance.
Shock.
Shocking.
Shock horror.
Shock and horror. Other genres that are playing around here is drama, historical, and comedy, according to Google.
Yeah, I can see that.
Google said romance comedy.
Is this the version of Pride and Prejudice with Colin Firth as Mr. Darcy?
No.
Is there a version of...
Maybe, I don't know. There's a lot of versions, of a fair few.
Okay.
A handful. But I will have you know that this is regarded as one of the better ones. Or
true.
one of the best.
How are we
According to like one website one time that ranked them. So like,
Yeah, fair
you
enough.
know, I guess take it with a grain of salt. This is the second feature film version. The first one was made in like the 40s. So, and was like kind of weird, I think, according to the internet.
So who plays Mr. Darcy?
Matthew McFadden.
It's not a name that I can immediately put
I
a face to.
recognize him.
Yeah.
He's a man. I couldn't tell you what else he's in.
Sure.
I may not have seen him in another role. I associate him pretty strongly with this role, despite not having seen the movie. But I've seen enough stills and memes.
Well, I saw the DVD cover, right, was Keira Knightley.
And he was in the background.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
So forgettable compared to Keira
She
Knightley.
was in the foreground. She's,
Yeah.
she's Keira Knightley. So this movie was released in 2005. It's obviously based on the Jane Austen novel, which was released in 1813.
Which, let's focus on that for a quarter of a second. You said you didn't do that in school. Have you read that book at all?
No.
Do you know anything of the story?
Yes.
Just like through...
Just through it
Osmosis?
having been around. And it's also like, it's just such a staple in the romance kind of trope genre, I feel,
Yeah.
you know?
I mean,
So I don't know everything, but I know enough that I feel like I know the plot.
I know literally nothing. Except for
Interesting.
perhaps maybe the... there's a bit of will they, won't they energy.
Sure.
Maybe.
I mean, you've just named romance.
Right.
Go on.
Yeah. But I mean, in
Sure.
the sense that if this book is quite old, right? Like, didn't you say like 1800s or something?
1813 is when it was written.
So
or
the
released.
will they, won't they trope,
Is a bit different from that era, yeah.
not only is it a bit different from that era, I mean, isn't this probably one of the first?
Maybe. I don't know.
Like,
No, I feel like that's a universal thing.
yeah.
You know what I mean? There was probably ancient Greeks writing about will they, won't they?
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's one of the most famous.
Yeah.
I also don't know how much of it is a will they, won't they, and more of a, from my understanding, it's more of a class thing.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a class divide in this story.
I thought everyone was highborn here.
No,
Noble.
there's layers. You know the nobles like to make their own caste system.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I find it interesting you haven't seen or read Pride and Prejudice.
No, I mean, look, it's the kind of thing that I've been meaning to. I think part of it is that I do feel like I know the story, so that hasn't endeared me to go watch it because I feel like I know it.
I'm surprised we haven't read it because we read some classic books.
We do. I mean, it's on my list. I just haven't got, I don't think I have a copy right now of Pride and Prejudice. So
I'm taking notes.
Let's talk director.
Oh, yeah?
Our director is a gentleman called Joe Wright.
I thought you were going to go with a different Joe for a second. I was about to be really thrown away.
Who?
What do you mean Joe Rogan directed Pride and Prejudice?
Well, this is Wright with a W.
Okay, there you go.
W-R. Right.
And do we have any other Joe Wrights under our belt?
No, we don't. In fact, this movie in 2005 was his feature directorial debut.
Oh, good on
He
him.
had done like TV directing prior.
Good on you, Joe.
Since this, he's gone on to do a few other movies, including Atonement,
That rings a bell.
which is also a book adaptation, which I think people did that in lit at my school in their like VCE, I think.
God, imagine being known as the
guy that people do literature books.
in high school. Year 11 and 12 VCE, Joe Wright.
Well, they're doing the books usually. Although usually you do like, you compare adaptations, right?
Or if you're a terrible student, you'll just do the movie and do your best.
Wing it, yeah. He also did The Soloist, which I have heard of very loosely. Then he did something called Hannah, but there's no H on the end. I haven't heard of that. And then he did Anna Karenina, which again, a book, a classic. So this guy loves his like classics.
Yeah.
That's his bread and butter, seemingly.
Adaptation to film, Joe Wright's all about it.
Then he did Pan, which I can only assume is a Peter Pan movie.
Yeah, I think I've seen that. Yeah.
I haven't seen that.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then Darkest Hour.
Don't know it.
Which I hadn't heard of. The Woman in the Window and Cyrano, both in 2021, and that's his latest one. So there's a few in there that I've heard of.
But haven't seen.
Yeah. But they're definitely like successful movies, I think.
I mean, I've heard, the fact that I've heard of so many of them, despite not having seen them, I think speaks to the fact that this guy has chops, hopefully.
Yeah, and especially seemingly in the historical space, because a lot of those, or at least 3 of them. But, that is good to know. That's about all I have on Joe Wright. I'm keen. His movie did well. This was a success. It wasn't like in the top whatever of the year, but it did well, especially in Britain, I think, because it's a British French. Like it's I think he's British.
I can see that going well. Joe Wright is definitely a very British name. So
hello, I'm Joe Wright. Yeah, he's English. It just sounded right. I had to test it in the mouth, mouth feel,
Yeah, the mouth feel of Joe Wright. If it's not, do you want to try Joe Wright's name in a Cockney accent while we're here?
Hello, I'm Joe Wright. Hang on, now let me try American to see if it sounds.
Yeah, okay. Hello.
Howdy. No, that was terrible. Hi, I'm Joe Wright.
What about,
that sounds wrong.
Howdy, I'm Joe Wright. But you can call me Joey.
Bonjour, je suis Joe Wright. Anyway, okay, we're moving on. This man is British. And that's pretty much, I don't really have much else written down because...
you haven't seen it, I haven't seen it.
We haven't seen it.
We know Keira Knightley's in it, we know some other dude is in it.
I don't really want to talk about how much I know about the plot because I don't want to ruin it for you. Well, besides what I've already said.
Let's not go into specifics.
Okay.
Because, if you're wrong, then there's no proof of it. And if you're right, then you would have spoiled it for me. But, like... as a percentage, right, key plot points, how much of this film would you be able to just narrate?
I think I know maybe like 50 to 60% of the key happenings. Maybe 40, 50. But see, here's the thing. That's what I think I know.
Yeah.
But I only know like the like 20% and there's a lot of other things that happen.
Who knows? This is a 2-hour film, which is not short. Yeah,
just over 2 hours, which is pretty reasonable. Good for like long looks over the moors of Britain, I assume. There's going to be some beautiful shots. That's what I'm expecting. So when I go into a film like this, it's romance and historical. I want pretty costumes, and I don't just mean like fancy. I mean like just beautiful historical, garb, and I want some sweeping, beautiful shots of countryside, I assume.
Yeah, coveted landscape.
Yep. I want longing looks. I want tension.
So, where this is going to be interesting is probably the most recent, thing that I've watched in this historical romance space is Bridgerton.
Right.
Which is a very high production quality TV show where they can spend a lot more time exploring plot and longing looks.
It's pretty different.
Well, right.
Obviously, it does have a lot of those crossovers, but there's a sort of a difference with this is actually based in actual history.
Yeah.
Whereas Bridgerton has a bit more, it's not fantasy, obviously, but Bridgerton is based in a fake world.
Yeah.
Right? So I think there's a bit more liberty to be a bit more...
Well, I think there's perhaps less drama in the, unsaid tension drama in Bridgerton, whereas a lot more perhaps is...
You complained a lot about everything unsaid at Bridgerton, I'll have you know.
No, but that's what I'm saying. I'm expecting this to be like even further into the unsaid way.
Interesting.
We're just going to get 10 minutes of dialogue, and I've used air quotes there, dear listener, dialogue, they're just looking at each other, and like a lip might move and a head might turn.
Well, speaking of
and like the strings will swell.
Speaking of non-verbal...
Sorry, go ahead.
You done?
Yeah.
Speaking of non-verbal communication cues, there is one scene in this movie that is like famous amongst romance enjoyers.
Are we talking like trope?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. It's become a bit of its own trope. It's like it's almost like a meme image or a meme GIF. You would say, and it is like the meme from this movie, if you will, or the thing.
Is it a Keira Knightley feature?
No. Well, she's in the scene.
Well, no, but
it's not something she does, though. Yeah. I'll point it out when it happens.
Okay, you better.
One last thing is I just wanted to sort of go through the cast. We've also already touched on Keira Knightley, Matthew Macfadyen as our main two people. There is a few other names in this movie that I recognise looking at the cast list. We've got Donald Sutherland, who is, you would know him as President Snow from the Hunger Games.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, that's like 10 years before the Hunger Games or whatever, but we also have Rosamund Pike, who plays Jane Bennett, who I believe is a sister of Keira Knightley. Rosamund Pike, you would know her as the main woman in Gone Girl, the wife.
This is a really good talent you have. I have no idea who the hell you're talking about, but you could just absolutely pick the most recent thing that we've both seen that you can then tell me who I'm thinking about.
Yeah, well, I've had to hone this skill over 11 years of knowing you.
You're astonishingly good.
Moving on, we have Jenna Malone as Lydia Bennett, who I believe is maybe another sister. I'm not 100%, I'm guessing at this point who these people are, but they all share the last name. So, and you would know her as also a Hunger Games actress. She plays in the second movie where they go back and they have to go back in with all the other victors.
Ooh.
She plays the like axe throwing kind of like, but she teams up with them. She gets undressed in the elevator.
No, I don't remember that.
Okay, well, the listeners will know Jenna Malone. Anyway, also, if you're wondering why I don't name the character, he won't know that any better, guys. I'm just letting you know that.
I don't remember the second movie at all.
Okay. We also have Judi Dench as Lady Catherine de Bourgh. I think that's how you say it. And lastly, and you probably won't know this person, but I recognise the name, is Carey Mulligan as Catherine Kitty Bennett. And she was actually in a movie that I haven't seen, and you haven't seen, but was pretty big recently, which is Promising Young Woman or Women. Actually, don't know. But that was like a pretty popular movie recently. I'm pretty sure it's Carey Mulligan. She's pretty cool.
All right.
I think. But I don't know how she was in this 2005 movie, so I guess it's time to find out.
20 years. 20 years can do a lot to a person.
Let's watch Pride and Prejudice.
First, we meet the Bennett family, 5 sisters who live in the English countryside with their parents. When a wealthy bachelor moves in nearby, all daughters are thrilled at the potential for a fruitful marriage. Mr. Bingley, along with his sister and his friend Mr. Darcy, become acquainted with the Bennets. Meanwhile, the inheritor of the Bennets' estate arrives, a Mr. Collins, who is looking for a wife amongst the Bennet girls. But finding no acceptance to his proposal, he instead marries a family friend, Charlotte. In Romance Elsewhere, Sister Jane Bennet's hopes to be Bingley's wife is under threat, and Elizabeth and Darcy butt heads, peeking at a scorned proposal. After younger sister Lydia elopes with the questionably ethical Wickham, it throws the Bennets into chaos. But all is well, as it comes to light that Mr. Darcy has arranged to pay Wickham off for both discretion and propriety, allowing the other Bennet girls to avoid scandal. Bingley is overcome with the strength of his feelings for Jane and proposes, much to the delight of all. Despite objections and threats from his aunt, Mr. Darcy professes his love again to Elizabeth, who, seeing his true character, accepts. He has some deeper thoughts on the matter.
You know, whenever I watch a historical film, I feel confirmed in my belief that if I was born in that era, I would epitomise the spinster cat lady energy.
I can't remember the daughter's name from Bridgerton, who is like the well-read one. Elaine?
Eloise.
I'm going to start with E, because that was the easiest part of the naming convention.
Yeah.
But yeah, you associated heavily with Eloise.
Sort of. Not really. Her disdain for... I don't have a disdain for relationships and marriage. I just think I would struggle to want... If I had the choice between...
I mean, you wouldn't. Let's be real.
Well, yeah. So I guess, but you can make yourself off-putting, I guess. I guess I wouldn't, my point is I wouldn't settle for anything but actual love, you know?
Yeah, but if you're making yourself off-putting, then your prospects...
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and by the time you're a 17-year-old spinster, you can't be married off anymore. Oh, man, what a wild time. But look, the story was very interesting because I liked how we established Mr. Darcy as this like kind of aloof, doesn't want to dance, not interested in anyone else's, he's too important. He has a low opinion of other people. Turns out he's just like a really loyal friend and doesn't get to know people easily. And so
doesn't have a good social skills, basically.
Yeah, judges quickly, is quick to judge, and therefore is quick to be judged. I did like how his prior engagement to the lady's daughter, can't remember her name, Judi Dench's character.
Catherine de Bourgh,
thank you. Is sort of this that's something that's holding him back and he's not going to talk about it in one way.
Sounds like it's been sort of since birth,
right,
basically. Like they're born to be married.
An arranged thing.
Yeah.
And, I expect in Pride and Prejudice 2, where Judi Dench raises an army to go against this small village for the crimes that have been committed against her. Because she was pretty pissed, but obviously nothing happens from that.
No. Well, I mean, I think that she has more of this expectation that she'll be respected, but he's technically of higher rank than her, so it doesn't matter really what she thinks.
That's fair. I mean, he did have the much nicer house.
Yeah.
And
did you see his museum?
Yeah, he had a whole ass museum. He had a marble carving of himself. Yeah, so, can't be rid of that. I did like the story the way it unfolded, though, and sort of he's actually a good guy. And who's that soldier? I can't remember his name.
Wickham.
I was like, Whittington? No, that's from that book we just read. How Wickham was like, oh no, yeah, he robbed me, he ripped me off. Turns out, no. He was just being very prudent and responsible. This guy gambled it all away. There's that line about it.
And he's also just, I think, generally not a good guy.
Yeah. And then...
Sucks for Lydia, who's been swept up in his
con.
Yeah, essentially. Well, although I do wonder what he benefits from. Maybe he just, I don't know. It's kind of odd, you know what I mean? Because obviously he tries to get with his sister, Georgiana.
Yeah.
Darcy's sister.
For £30,000, yeah.
But obviously that doesn't go well for him, but he's not going to get much money. I guess he did get money.
Yeah.
Though,
the implication is that Mr. Darcy paid for the wedding and also a dowry, and to make it, official, all Mr. Bennett has to do is pay a £100 stipend.
Right.
Which is, relatively not that big.
It's so funny hearing the numbers that they throw around, obviously, because everything's changed so much, but they're making such a fuss about $5,000 a year.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
Funny.
Well, I mean, it's that's inflation. That's
that's
cause he lives, Beck. In 1800, you could be one of the richest men about town on £5,000 a year. Couple of 100 years of Cosy lives, and that's like a weekly rent in some parts of London or something.
I did appreciate a lot of what I said in the intro about what I wanted out of this film. I got.
Mm-hmm.
We got a few lovely sweeping shots. We had some moors, and she was on some cliffs at one point, looking very pensive.
Yeah, there was some good English countryside all around.
There was also the beautiful settings. So there was a couple of nice fancy houses, mostly Darcy's house that she walks around, admiring all the paintings and statues. And then even the clothing was good. Like you said, it was kind of more normal.
Well, one thing you sort of pointed out, and I didn't sort of notice it, but I agree, is that they all were very remarkably normal. Yeah, well,
because they're meant to be obviously this I don't know what the word is. Lower nobility. I don't really know if they're even nobility.
I mean, they're not commoners,
I don't know what the word
but they're
is
probably
for
commoners.
I think, that their estate is incredibly small, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, I don't know all the words for how they're defined in this particular society, but the hair and the dresses and stuff is very believable for their place in the world, and it's not perfect. So something compared to Bridgerton, right? But it's kind of hard to compare. You can't really compare to Bridgerton because they're really rich.
Well, everyone in Bridgerton is high society.
I know, so we can't really compare it. But I guess my point is, the particular thing I said to you was that Keira Knightley's hair is remarkably normal looking, whereas in a lot of both TV and movies, women's hair and faces are often made to look weirdly perfect in situations where they wouldn't be.
Yeah, like
waking up.
Had just been on a walk in the
just,
wind.
Like just things like that, which her hair looked normal and it was really quite, and I don't mean bad, I don't mean like, oh, it was messy. It just looked normal rather than this weird perfection that is just unnatural.
Yeah.
So that was really, I enjoyed that. That was very, I don't know if it was immersive necessarily, but it
certainly added something.
It added a cultural, I don't know, realness to it.
Yeah.
A grit, perhaps. I don't know. Not really. It's not gritty, but it's, I don't know, texture to the film.
An element of realism that is it is certainly appreciated.
For sure.
In something where we're looking at a historical film that was, based on a book written 200 years ago. So what do you do? Pretty close to it. I'm glad that Jane and I've already forgotten his name. I'm so bad at names. Bingley. That Jane and Bingley got together. That was cute. That was the matching I was looking for. Mm-hmm. Wasn't the biggest fan of Mr. Darcy. Like, he was a bit not a nice guy at the start, and obviously that's the point. Right. And
that's the plot.
I didn't really warm up to him in the end either.
I mean, I think he's just a certain, he's a certain flavour, right, of person.
Right, yeah.
He's quite reserved.
I could appreciate the fact that he was a loyal and good friend and a person of his word. Like he was a good guy.
Yes.
I just didn't want him.
Yeah, that's fine.
What do you do? He's no Anthony Bridgerton.
See, I thought you liked, now we're talking about Bridgerton again, but I thought you liked Simon more.
Simon had like a nicer wardrobe. And I think
you think Anthony's the better guy.
Well, I mean, we haven't seen Simon in a minute, but Anthony Bridgerton, he's in the actor who plays him was just in Wicked. So it's on the brain. You go to sleep at night thinking about Anthony Bridgerton because you've just seen him, for a couple of weeks at least.
Speak for yourself. So, yeah, I get what you mean about Mr. Darcy. Like, he's definitely not the, I guess, perfect love interest. And I guess that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Is that Elizabeth doesn't, it is kind of like that bit at the, not to harp on, but Bridgerton season 2 when she, sees him and they have this, she hears him say something mean about her and that puts them off, right? Or puts her off.
What I like about this, particularly about this take on the Pride and Prejudice, is that he isn't inherently this very attractive man. And so it is actually kind of believable that she finds his abrasiveness combined with the fact that he's not drop dead gorgeous to be, it's pretty easy.
I think he is meant to be quite handsome.
Does anyone even talk about it? I suppose they do.
Yes, they literally have a whole conversation about it in front of his marble bust.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
And I think he is handsome.
All right.
He's just not your type.
No, yeah, it's true.
I've picked up on that. Literally, I need the listener to know that as we were clicking play on this movie 2 hours ago, Frosty uttered the phrase, "Why don't they ever cast handsome people in British romances?" And I looked you dead in the eye and said, what do you mean by that? This man is handsome, and I think you just have a very particular opinion on it.
I've got a type.
Clearly, not him.
Yeah, I can't remember his name. Matt Ramage? I don't know.
Matthew McFadden.
Look, I got some of the letters. I wonder if I'm gaslighting myself. Was there ever a Mr. Darcy played by Colin Firth?
Let me Google it since you're harping on about it.
I
think you're right.
Yeah, okay.
What? But do you think Colin Firth is more attractive?
No, not really. I just want to know whether or not my face blindness is so strong.
Yes, there is.
Okay, thank God.
There was a TV series in 1995.
Okay, so what I was worried about was that I had in my brain replaced this guy with Colin Firth, just, because of Pride and Prejudice, and of course it'd be Colin Firth. But I guess not. I guess there was separately a Pride and Prejudice Colin Firth, and that has taken up the default position of Mr. Darcy. Didn't know it was a TV show, though.
Yes, well, yeah. So that came in between the movie in the 40s and this one. I did read on the Wikipedia that the director specifically did not watch the TV show or any other adaptation. He had seen the 1940 film.
Okay.
But he decided not to watch anything else because he didn't want to accidentally steal ideas or he wanted to be original.
Yeah.
As original as possible, and so he refused to watch them.
I did like this rendition overall.
We don't have anything to compare it to.
Well, I mean, we do. I mean, well, and maybe you have done it in school, but I mean, I vaguely remember like some of the, what I found quite interesting in watching this is that you could see where some of the language and tropes really do shine through from those Victorian era elements. Like, you know.
Is it Victorian era?
Is it Victorian era? I thought it was Victorian.
It's the late 1700s, it says late 18th century.
I thought that was the Victorian era.
1837 to 1901, so not
quite.
What
predates the Victorian era?
The Georgian era.
Really?
Lasted from 1714 to around 1830, 1837.
Is that just based on who's, like, on the throne?
I mean, partly, yeah, I think so, because it's how you define eras. Yeah. It's who was ruling. That's Britain for you, basically.
There you go.
The Regency era was like early 1800s, so also after this. Wasn't Victorian, it was like Regency or Georgian.
Yeah, well, I guess what I meant to say is more just like that horse and cart, big dresses
Carriage
and balls.
Yeah.
That could all just be the same timeline as far as I know the difference, because I don't. I'm not an historian educated in the matter of...
You're not?
I'm not an historian educated in the matter of British history and things and stuff.
Saying historian and then saying history like a sentence later is very funny.
I enjoyed it. It was a good film. I nearly died. What was that scene? Oh, it was so gosh damn funny. I
think, the scene that you slapped your knee about 12 times in laughter was when Bingley and Darcy show up to the house randomly and all of the Bennets are rapidly trying to look casual, doing their womanly hobbies and to clean up the house.
Moments before they've just like cleaned up everything, the house is a mess, and then like
the chaos.
It's
very well done. I understand why this movie is romance comedy. Like there is a lot of funny scenes, and I really enjoyed the dynamic of the family.
Yes.
Like it was very believable. They're like the mum and dad and their sort of bickering disagreement. I mean, the mum was just hilarious.
Yes.
But awful. I would be frustrated as hell.
Oh, yeah.
Living under her.
Funny to watch.
Yes. Not funny to experience. Yeah. And then obviously all the sisters who have various dynamics. You've got like the two little ones who are like giggling at everything. You've got the goth. And then you've got the two older ones who have this kinship as well. They're sort of closer. And the dad as well, who's sort of old and doddery, but clearly loves his family. Yeah. And has seemingly a particular affection for Elizabeth.
Yes.
Which is sweet.
I think the implication is that he sees a kindred soul in her.
Yeah. Because she reads and she has this sort of...
Speaks her mind. Yes. She's not afraid to sort of stand up for herself and her family and her friends as well.
Yeah.
Whereas the oldest sister is too reserved, very quiet.
She's too pretty.
And also too believes the best in everyone.
Right. She doesn't speak, ill of anyone.
So yeah, it's a good story.
Another favourite part of mine involving the father, who Donald Sutherland does a great job at, when Mr. Collins proposes to Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And the mother's like, you have to make her accept. And he's like, Lizzie, you have to say goodbye to one of your parents today. If you don't marry him, your mother will never speak to you again. And if you do marry him, I won't ever speak to you again. So that was clever. I like that.
The dialogue was good. I wonder how much of the dialogue is lifted straight from the book. Yeah.
Probably key sentences. Or key passages.
I think we have to read the book now just to sort of have a crack at it, which would be interesting. Because I didn't remember enough key. How close were your key points of the story that you had sort of penned down in your head? You had most of it.
Most of it. I didn't know anything. So what I knew in my head was that I knew that Mr. Collins arrived and he wanted Lizzie, but then she said no. I knew that he married someone else, but I didn't know who. I thought maybe it was one of her sisters, but it ends up being Charlotte, that friend.
Yep.
And then I knew the name Mr. Wickham. I'd heard it, but I didn't know his connection to the story.
Sure.
And I didn't really know the fate of any of the other sisters.
Yeah, so you didn't know that the youngest had run off with Mr. Wickham.
Correct, I didn't know about that. I also didn't really know about Bingley and Jane at all. But I did basically know the key plot points of Darcy and Lizzie.
Yeah.
And I know that they ended up together. But I mean, that's not a huge surprise. No. It's a romance movie.
Yeah, so that's what we signed up for.
Yeah.
The one that was really a will they, won't they was the Jane and Bingley of it all.
It's a bit more, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess I knew some points. Yeah, I guess that the really overarching thing is Bingley and Jane, because that's sort of where it starts.
Yeah.
And, that's...
And that's sort of one of the seals, if you like, when Darcy comes back and fixes that up.
And the whole reason that Darcy's around is because of Bingley. So there's sort of, in another world, their story is the background to Bingley and Jane's.
There probably is a book of that.
Someone's probably done a...
Instead of Pride and Prejudice, it's aloofness and redheadedness. I don't know.
Just boil the man down to his hair. Damn. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. It was good. I do like Keira Knightley. I think she's a good actress, but she has what I like to call face acting. She does a lot of face acting, which means
I can't not see Keira Knightley.
There's that.
It's Keira Knightley.
And just the way that she moves her face, the way she enunciates, so it's both a speech thing and a visual thing, just makes her so supremely Keira Knightley that it's impossible not to see, and that is slightly distracting.
Whereas, like, President Snow...
Donald Sutherland, yeah.
You could forgive me.
He did a great job.
He did a great job. Like, the speech affectation for that father, you would think that actor had a speech impediment.
Right, and like he disappeared more into the role very, very well in every aspect. And the other actresses that I knew about, Rosamund Pike, Carey Mulligan, but the other sisters, they were all young enough and looked different enough, and they were, it was sort of before I knew them as other roles that I could also not be distracted by their actorness, I
wonder how much Keira Knightley suffers from it because, she has this window of acting where she looked so much like Keira Knightley and is so much Keira Knightley and no one is quite like her.
Yeah.
That she just suffers from being so recognizable as that and can't escape it.
Maybe.
But if we saw her in something where she was much older or much younger, maybe that's different. I don't know.
I mean, I haven't really seen her in anything quite recently. The three things that I've seen her the most in is this. I've seen pictures of her in this role.
Yeah.
Obviously, Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, which is in all of those, basically.
Swan, also in Elizabeth. And then also in Love Actually, which is also a similar time. So she has this sort... And I don't think she's changed all that. She has grown up a bit. Like, her face has changed a bit, matured a little bit. But yeah, she does have a very striking face in many respects. So I think you're right that she just can't really get away from it. But she still does a good job. She's certainly not a bad actress. She's very good. And I understand why she gets these kinds of roles. She does have a good face for that period type piece. Like, some people have what is called nowadays iPhone face, which is basically a face that would look wrong in a period piece because it's usually a result of two things or could be sort of combined. One, you've had too much plastic surgery, and that plastic surgery has been in pursuit of modern beauty standards, and beauty standards have changed so much over the years, right? But if you take someone with like quote unquote modern beauty standard face and, so like plumper lips, maybe on a face that wouldn't naturally have that, thicker eyebrows because obviously. As
somebody who struggles with face blindness, these kinds of changes you talk about making to somebody's face are akin to disguise.
Sure.
It's akin to disguise for me.
But if you take someone with those features and you put them in a show or a movie like this.
Unrecognizable, yes.
That's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that they don't look correct.
Yeah, okay.
They look out of place, time traveler, weird. And especially if they're like the only one and then everyone else sort of does fit in, it's like it's jarring.
What you're saying is if everyone has quote unquote British teeth and somebody has like medically straight teeth,
right,
it's upsetting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, people complained, not to go back to Bridgerton for the 51st time, but
it's the closest thing for us to make
it's our most recent exposure to a similar piece of media, yes. But they complained that in the latest season 3, a lot of the actresses had like gel manicures and like their makeup and stuff it looked too modern, which, I don't really care about that kind of thing because Bridgerton to me is a little bit of a fantasy anyway. It's not like this, which should be more
historically accurate. It was trying to be
exactly.
Pretty,
So that's, I felt like I've gone enough on a tangent for that, but it was good. I enjoyed this film a lot. I am excited to read the book to see exactly how Jane Austen's original text was translated.
I think that also because it's so old, 200 years just about.
Over 200 years.
That's like, it's going to be very interesting to understand how that translates,
right.
Whether this was a remarkable work of translation by Joe Wright and the team to make it onto screen in a very enjoyable fashion, or whether the original text was just such a good, solid foundation that it didn't need much more than the right actors and actresses and away you went.
Yeah.
So, very keen to read it.
It's always tough to do the task of taking a book to screen because, you're always going to be missing details, right?
Yeah, you've got to cut something.
Because there simply cannot, there's so many words in a book.
And soliloquy rarely translates well to screen.
Yeah.
So often on a book you'll get some internal narrative that you miss.
Well, maybe there was all that. I'm sure there's internal narrative that is her standing on that cliff.
Yep.
But we just get the cliff shot to demonstrate that she's having a moment, that she's having introspection and thinking about it. So it'll be interesting to see if there was anything we felt was cut unnecessarily or if any creative license was taken with
that would be fascinating.
Any character vibes.
I think I'm ready to rate this film.
Fair enough. If you're ready, then take it away.
I'm going to give it 8.7 well-crafted, remarkable marble statues in a private museum out of 10.
Sometimes when you start your sentence, I've forgotten the number by the time you end it. Was it 8.7?
It was 8.7.
Okay. Just because I was like waiting for you to unfold the whole thing.
Yeah.
Got it. 8.7, it's high praise.
It was an enjoyable film. I laughed. I cried. I didn't actually cry.
You didn't cry. I am going to rate it a solid 8.3 hand flexes out of 10.
Hand flex. Yeah, fair enough.
It's just too iconic not to choose as my object, as my thing.
Yep. No. That's a lot of hand flexes to 8.3. That's like your hand flexing for a while there.
I would prefer more Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth are both a bit too samey and reserved, and I don't know. There's just not enough. They're not interesting enough for me to rate it any higher. Yeah. But the rest of the story was really good, and all of the other supporting character arcs and everything was really good.
I can fully get on board with that.
Yeah.
The reason I rated it a little bit higher, closer to 9, is I thought there was, for a 2-hour film, not a lot they could have cut. There were only a handful of moments where I'm like, I see why this is long. Like the swelling piano, Mr. Darcy walking out of the fog toward Elizabeth.
You can't cut that.
But that was the only moment I caught myself thinking, I wonder if they thought about cutting this. There was basically no other time where I was like, they're not, usefully establishing something, or they're not demonstrating how Jane and Elizabeth's family are denigrating themselves in front of the entire society.
My thought that I thought they might have cut was actually very early on during the dancing.
Yeah, there was a fair bit of that.
There was the 2 balls with a lot of dancing. The first ball especially, there was a lot that I think... But they were trying to demonstrate that Bingley was falling in love with Jane. So I understand why it was there. But there was a bit of, perhaps extraneous dance scenes.
Yeah. You
could say.
Yep.
So, very enjoyable overall.
Yeah.
I do love historical drama. I think it's one of my favourite genres as a history nerd.
And honestly, historical comedy drama... It hits a good spot, and this did hit a really good spot of comedy and drama.
I felt like we needed something a bit lighter.
No, it was good. I was when we first selected this, I was worried it was going to be a more drama romance heavy piece, and that's not always my speed. But this was definitely a much more frivolous. Like there was obviously some serious moments, but broadly speaking, it was an enjoyable comedy. I would recommend people watch this if they haven't seen it for sure.
Absolutely, it's good to hear. Well, if you have any recommendations that you'd like to throw our way, you can find us on Instagram at the BLTN Club, Facebook, Better Late Than Never Club, or of course over on our Patreon where our faves live.
Come talk to us, leave some comments, chat us up, tell us what we should review next.
And catch you on the next episode.
Till next time.
This episode of the Better Late Than Never Club is brought to you by our patrons. Alex, Christopher, Lindy, Matthew, Nathan, and Rachel.
And also our members, Aimless, Andrew, Raina, Salty Pond, and Simon.
Thank you for listening.